Hi, welcome to another edition of 1 in 15. As ever, I'm going to get my guests to introduce themselves.
Hey, my name is Yannick Jacob, and I'm an existential coach and a positive psychologist. I generally help people navigate the big questions in life. And I help people in positions of responsibility, I call it. So often leaders and managers, but and I think anybody's in a position of responsibility if
Sure.
we're human. I help those people to make big decisions, kind of navigate life, and I help coaches to be better coaches. So
Brilliant.
that's a short version.
That's great. Yeah, and I know enough about your bio to know that you've left loads of stuff out. So that's great. As you know, part of this series, we're just basically asking people what one big thing has been dominating their thinking. So what is that one big thing for you, Yannick?
Yeah, it's really difficult to choose one big thing, the one, because there's so many things going on. But as I was tuning into what this is, I think one big thing that has been dominating my thinking for the last decade at least is how, as people, we tend to always try, or there seems to be a certain trend to try to avoid discomfort and tension and conflict.
Sure.
And existentially, and this is kind of where I'm coming from, there's conflicts and tensions built into the fabric of the human condition, which means that to be human means to experience conflict and tension and dilemma and paradox. And I see a lot of people trying to avoid that, not engage in it, kind of suppress it, or somehow not feel it, when the only way to avoid it is to, stop existing. Sure. Or to distract yourself heavily from, being still. So I see that a lot, and the question I often ask myself and come to some sort of way forward is, how can we embrace rather than try to avoid the inevitable? How might we be able to embrace that tension and that conflict as something that is not necessarily feeling nice, but something that certainly has a lot of value and meaning?
Yeah, I mean, there's loads in what you said that we could unpack. And I guess one of the things that's leaping out for me is, I've done a few bits and bobs of conflict resolution in my time, and often when you talk to people who want conflict resolution, what they actually want is conflict avoidance. They don't want to engage with it. They're scared about the cost for themselves or for somebody else. And for me, again, one of the things that's really been apparent in this global pandemic is that a lot of us who thought that we didn't have tensions, who thought that we didn't have stresses, have suddenly been much more aware of how ever-present they are and how unavoidable they are. So where do we go forward from this, Yannick? What do we do with this knowledge?
Well, I think the first step would be to start sitting with that kind of conflict, that kind of tension. I think we can all feel it, whether that's a very tangible kind of conflict, like we are in a dispute with somebody, or we've gotten bad feedback, or somebody just doesn't like us for some reason. That's tension that can potentially be resolved. And I've worked in conflict resolution as well. So some of this conflict can be resolved, by talking about things or by, facing it. Some of the tensions may not be resolved, but I think the very first step, regardless of what kind of conflict it is to allow yourself to sit with it, to resist the temptation of making that conflict go away, of avoiding it, or of distracting yourself from it, to have the courage, and it takes courage to sit with that kind of tension, to sit with that uncomfortable feeling of either undefined, vague eeriness, in the existential sense, or perhaps a real I don't like how this feels. I don't like to be in conflict with people. I can't bear the thought of somebody else maybe not liking my ideas, or me having made a mistake, or being wrong, or, we like to have good relationships. And when we don't, the tendency is to avoid the discomfort, which is natural.
Sure. That's really interesting. And again, as you're saying that, I'm finding myself thinking about a concept that we've discussed on another couple of these interviews about being in a liminal space at the moment, about being in between what was and what is to come. And obviously that is a place of tension and discomfort. And it occurs to me, particularly as a coach and people who works with people trying to be thought leaders or business leaders or what have you, that there's so much pressure on us, all of us at the moment, to fix things, to get it right. But actually, I want us to encourage to kind of look at the next 6 months, next 2 years as a place of potential and opportunity, as well as discomfort and stress. Because if we try and fix it too quickly, we're going to miss a load of opportunities, and we're going to miss some of the lessons that discomfort and that change is maybe trying to teach us.
Yeah, and that discomfort has so many sources, right? Right now, and one of your other guests, Andy, I think it was, alluded to that in a different episode as well. Is the general not knowing right now. Uncertainty is built as well into the fabric of, not just physics, but also the world in itself. But certainly in this period of life right now, because there's so many changes right now, and the nauseating speed of development in like nanotech and biotech, but generally in the world, it leaves a lot of space for, how could I possibly plan my next 6 months even?
Yeah.
Think 6 months back, the world was, felt like a very different place. So imagine you're starting a new company, or an organization, or a family, or a relationship.
Yeah.
You're like, well, I don't know what the world's going to be like in 6 months, but then nobody knows. And even if you think you have an accurate prediction of how the world would be like, chances are it's going to be different. Yeah. So as humans, we are attached to this need for certainty in a world where certainty is never a certainty.
Yes, sure.
So that's difficult to sit with. But I think what we can do is, first of all, acknowledge that fact. I think that we will never be 100% certain of any outcomes. I can try to leave this room, and I cannot be certain enough that will actually happen. Might have a heart attack, or a plane crashes into the building, or my wife locked the room for some reason. So I'm pretty confident, but I don't really know. So I think if at the foundation we accept that that's the case, we're one step closer to moving towards life, with that acknowledgement of things might just not work out, and that's okay.
Sure.
And I think that's important, to develop the kind of courage to move forward without knowing. I can make a 6 months plan, but if I get too attached to the outcome of that plan, then I'll probably fall into a hole at some point. But it shouldn't stop me from making plans. It's like, be passionately attached to the strategy going forward, but don't be surprised if, the world changes along the way and your plan or strategy is no longer relevant.
Yeah. I think that's really pertinent at the moment, isn't it? That kind of, for so many people who've been used to, broadly speaking, their plans coming to fruition, the last 6 months has been a time of great tribulation in that respect, hasn't it? All those plans that people make, people go on holidays, people planning weddings, but business plans as well. Suddenly things have had to either stop or change dramatically, not happen or change dramatically. And I guess it's, for me, I've got a history of depression and anxiety, and one of the things that that those of us with anxiety often find is really helpful is releasing ourselves into the unknown. Like on a bad mental health day, historically, I didn't know who I was going to wake up as the next day. I didn't know if I was going to wake up someone with loads of possibility and energy, or if I was going to wake up as someone who getting out of bed was going to be, quite difficult. But kind of giving myself permission to not know, and to not make too firm plans, or as coaches, I guess we would say, trying to recognize the things that we're in control of, the things that we're completely not in control of, and that big chunk of stuff in the middle where we can influence an outcome but not guarantee it. That's really liberating if we can do the mental kind of headspace work to get into that place.
And I mean, this is a more extreme form of that, like a less extreme form of that everybody experiences. I don't know who I'm gonna wake up as tomorrow. We just don't know. So some people have a very like a more extreme form of that, due to mental health issues or whatever else. Some people just live more of a spectrum. But nobody wakes up the same person tomorrow as they are today. So I think that's great, and not just because I like novelty, and because I know that the not knowing adds a tremendous amount of excitement to our life. And excitement is just a different, like a different value judgment for anxiety. It's like it triggers similar regions in the brain. It feels similarly. But if we relate to the word or the feeling differently, we could call it excitement instead of being nervous or anxious.
Sure.
Because if we knew everything, life would be incredibly boring. So that's why I think I can certainly embrace sitting there with the discomfort of not knowing. even though I would really like to know. But there's certain things we don't like to know. We don't like to, know the outcome of the football. We don't generally read the last page of the book first. We don't like spoilers, and there's spoiler alerts all over. So, that excitement wouldn't get spoiled for people. And I think if we can develop a similar attitude towards what's going on in our work projects or in our relationships, I wouldn't want to know how long my next relationship is going to last. I think generally people like the excitement of not knowing. Otherwise, we would get terribly depressed, I think, if we knew absolutely everything. Life wouldn't be exciting.
Yeah, that's certainly a risk. I mean, I guess that's a big question for you then, as somebody who spends a lot of thought space in this field and this area, is for anyone listening who feels trapped in a more kind of anxious reaction to that unknowing, and listens to you talk about excitement and maybe academically gets it, but emotionally is struggling to connect. How might they get from that one way of thinking to a more positive space?
Yeah, I mean, there is no one size fits all. The best way I know is a series of conversations, and you as a coach probably preaching to the converted. But whether that's a coach or a therapist or a friend or a journal, if you start processing those emotions and those experiences, it can help you make sense of them, because I believe we attach meaning to these experiences. And when we experience something, generally it's quite neutral. It's just an experience. We then attach value and meaning to these experiences. So if we work with somebody who's trained in helping people change their relationships with their experiences, then we can start changing the experience, just by giving a different category or label on it, just by attaching different meaning on that. And I think human beings have the power to do that, and sometimes it might seem that that's just not available to us just because how we're feeling right now. We're just so impacted by our emotions. It's not possible to form a positive thought, so those days exist, especially for people who suffer from depression. But for most people, most of the time, we can go through a process where we can say, I'm going to choose to view this differently. And actually, I appreciate that different perspective on things. I appreciate that maybe I don't need to feel that way. Maybe there's something positive around this. There's we don't need to ask people who are deeply depressed, what's positive about your life right now? That's why after positive psychology, I kind of moved into the existential space, because I felt a lot of positive psychologists were a little bit too positive for my taste. But there's certainly an opportunity there to dig into what that means to me. How am I feeling? What's going on here? And what kind of value judgments do I put on that? And then talk that through, which opens doors into, viewing yourself, relating to the world, relating to other people differently.
Yeah. I mean, I'm with you. You wouldn't be surprised as a fellow coach, 100% on that stuff. I mean, I think for me, there's a real value, isn't there, in articulating your thoughts with somebody else who's not there to agree or disagree with them, but just there to hear them and to reflect them back to you, and to maybe ask you questions about, well, what else might be going on, as well as having, like one of the most helpful things somebody said to me a couple of months ago when I was feeling quite anxious, and I was trying to, as you say, put that meaning on it, trying to really work out where it was coming from. And my friend just said, well, we're living in a global pandemic. You haven't got a job. You've got 3 school-age kids at home you're trying to look after. You've got some things that it's okay to be anxious about. There's some sources for that anxiety that are understandable, forgivable. Now, of course, the challenge then remains with me to, well, how do I channel that anxiety? Do I let myself get trapped by it, or can I turn it into a more kind of positive energy to do things?
And it's also easy to look to the people who seem to be coping amazingly with this. It's easy to compare ourselves to the Instagram version of a friend of ours, or a coworker, or somebody who's portrayed in the media, or somebody who sits there and says, well, I'm never uncertain. And, this has been great. And you just need to develop these and these skills, and maybe pay me a couple of grand to do my online course, But it's easy to find those examples of people who are seemingly not struggling with this. And my advice would be to be careful around that, because I have yet to meet a human being that isn't affected by, you know, uncertainty or struggle, or, you know, our wanting to make meaning of things when maybe there is no meaning. You know, sitting with with absurdity and uncertainty, and be okay that that exists. You know, just kind of not knowing who I am without my job or my industry. And yes, some people seemingly just are so resilient that they lose their job and they just do something else. You know, their relationship breaks up, and then they just kind of move on without seemingly struggling with it. And when you dig a little bit deeper, everybody struggles with life and how to navigate it, and the general uncertainty of things. And, you know, these things that are just part of being human. That's okay to struggle with that. And I see a really positive trend in the recent decade or so, where more and more people show up vulnerable. You know, Brené Brown's work around vulnerability was really important, I think. So even people in high-powered leadership positions, they show up as being human. And I think that humanization is a really positive trend that I see, that people recognize that you don't have to be perfect all the time, and that also people like other people who don't portray themselves as the supermen and superwomen out there, who have this, you know, steel shield and are super resilient and recover from everything. No, we're all human, we're all suffering.
Yeah. Yannick, we've run out of time. I normally try and get my guests to kind of say, you know, what's there, where's the potential, where's the hope, the possibility. But I think we've kind of peppered it all the way through. It's really interesting, you know, to not necessarily accept the meaning that you're giving yourself, to cope that there may be no meaning, to certainly not compare yourself to the best version of other people with the worst version of yourself, that kind of stuff. And the value of just spending time with yourself and with other people to really think these through and face the reality of the situations. Yannick,
and you can always create meaning whatever you're experiencing. You know, you can always put something positive on that if you wanted to. You know, it doesn't necessarily mean feels nice, but it can feel meaningful.
Yeah. And as coaches, we want to say sometimes you need somebody else with you to get that work done. Yannick, you've been an amazing guest. Thank you very much for your time today. Bless you.
You're more than welcome. Thanks for doing this.
You're welcome.